They said it was dumb. They laughed, screenshotted, whispered, and replayed it like proof that you were built wrong. You remember that night, the air heavy with second guessing, your phone lighting up with opinions from people who've never risked anything but comfort. That one move, that one leap you took when logic said chill, they labeled it a fail. But deep down, you knew that move had meaning. It just wasn't time-stamped yet. You didn't defend it. You just sat in the quiet, feeling the sting, watching the world write your obituary like you were done. Every scroll, every side eye, every told you so became part of your new fuel. Because when you've got vision, the crowd always lags behind schedule. They see the crash. You see the course correction. You knew the universe wasn't punishing you. It was positioning you. That dumb move was the universe testing if you meant what you said when you claimed you wanted more. It stripped you of applause, stripped you of backup, and left you standing face to face with your raw intent. That's how legends are drafted, in isolation, in misunderstanding, in rooms where even silence seems to doubt you. You didn't quit, you recalibrated. They called it a mistake because it didn't make sense in their small logic. But that's the point. Nothing revolutionary ever looks smart in the beginning. Nobody claps for the foundation. They only show up for the skyline. You just happen to start your empire with the blueprint upside down. But guess what? Upside down is how perspective gets born. You replayed that move over and over. The embarrassment, the fallout, the whispers. Every time it replayed, something shifted. The pain started speaking. The regret turned into a voice that said, "Good." They weren't supposed to understand yet, because every great plot twist starts like a bad decision. So you stayed low-key. You stayed building in the shadows, hands dirty, ego detoxed. You learned the art of silence, not the weak kind, the weaponized kind, the one that lets people underestimate you just long enough for destiny to finish its edits. You realized the worst thing that ever happened to your pride was the best thing that ever happened to your purpose. That dumb move, yeah, that was the seed. You just didn't know the soil was concrete. But even concrete cracks when roots insist. Now it's cracking. And soon, they'll call it genius. They laughed loud, like the echo could rewrite your reality. Every scroll, every bro, you really did that, felt heavier than the failure itself. You could feel the weight of their amusement sitting on your shoulders, like a chain forged out of memes and screenshots. They called you reckless, said you moved without thinking. They forgot that every revolution starts with one mistake that refuses to stay one. You watched people who swore they believed in you vanish like morning fog. That's how loyalty moves when validation expires. You learned the difference between supporters and spectators. The first few stayed silent. The rest stayed noisy. And while they laughed, you stayed working. While they posted, you planned. You learned what it feels like to have no cheerleaders, just consequence and conviction. Late nights hit different after that. The air got colder, quieter. You started hearing the small sounds, your own heartbeat syncing with something bigger. You weren't chasing approval anymore. You were decoding purpose. That's when the pain started turning into precision. You realized embarrassment is just energy waiting for direction. People love to watch a downfall. It makes them feel safe. But you were learning leverage. You were studying every angle, every misstep, every L like it was curriculum. You didn't need revenge. You needed mastery. Because once you understand why it broke, you can build it unbreakable. You stopped trying to prove them wrong. You started making yourself right. That's the moment the story flipped, when the joke they made about you started aging badly. You could feel the shift coming. Even your failures started holding posture. Because that's what happens when pain turns professional. Now the silence isn't punishment, it's power. You don't argue. You don't clap back. You don't explain. You just rebuild. You let the results arrive late but loud. Because real success doesn't need to announce. It enters like karma with better timing. And when it does, every laugh that used to echo will sound like applause in disguise. The loudest part of failure is always the silence that follows. That space where nobody texts back, where every scroll feels like proof that the world moved on without you. It's weird, isn't it? How fast people vanish when your highlight reel glitches? That's the moment you stop existing for their entertainment and start existing for your evolution. The silence hit different because it wasn't empty. It was training. You learned that silence doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means everything's reorganizing. You stopped filling quiet with overthinking. You started letting it breathe, because silence is where clarity hides. It's the pause before the remix, the still frame before the plot twist. And you needed that stillness to remember who you are when nobody's cheering. That's when you realized you weren't rebuilding your name. You were resetting your narrative. Every night felt like therapy, without words. You replayed that dumb move in your head, frame by frame, not with regret, but curiosity. You started seeing things they missed, how that risk exposed fake support, how it revealed which voices were fear in disguise, how it burned away everything, not aligned with your next version. Pain wasn't punishment, it was precision. The universe wasn't mad, it was making room. Days blurred, but your thoughts got sharper. You began journaling without realizing it, mental notes, quiet strategies, half-whispered promises. You built muscle in your mind before the world ever noticed. That's what they don't tell you about comebacks. They start invisible. Every morning you woke up a little more ruthless with distractions, a little more loyal to peace. You became allergic to chaos. You stopped checking who left and started watching who stayed silent, with respect instead of pity. In that quiet, you changed frequencies. You started hearing new voices, the ones inside, the one that said, "Don't rush this." They're not ignoring you. They're being removed from your atmosphere. That's how silence feels when you finally understand it. It's not loneliness, it's calibration. You didn't realize it yet, but that stillness was your glow-up incubator. The one where confidence doesn't shout, it reheats. Where faith grows teeth. Where the next chapter starts writing itself behind closed doors. You weren't ghosted, you were guarded. And soon, the silence that once felt like exile would sound like applause rehearsing early. Then it happened. Slow at first. Like the world exhaled and forgot it. Ever doubted you. Things started aligning in ways logic couldn't explain. People who ghosted you started orbiting again, pretending they'd never left. The same ones who clowned your dumb move now quoted you in their captions. You didn't post about it. You didn't gloat. You just moved quiet. Because when the universe flips, noise feels cheap. You felt the frequency shift before anyone could name it. The air got clearer. Your ideas hit smoother. Even failure started feeling like foreshadowing instead of defeat. That's how the glow-up begins. Subtle. It's not fireworks, it's calibration. Every no you took earlier becomes a breadcrumb pointing to the version of you that doesn't beg for yeses anymore. You didn't wake up lucky. You woke up aligned. There's a difference. Luck is loud. Alignment whispers. It's the way time starts folding in your favor. The right text hits when you've already decided to move on. The right door opens because you stopped knocking. The world starts matching your pace, not the other way around. That's when you realize it was never punishment. It was training. Your silence had been echoing in the right places. Every late night, every failure you dissected quietly was broadcasting to something bigger. That energy built compound interest while you were healing. You were never behind. You were just buffering destiny. And now, the download's complete. The shift doesn't come with applause. It comes with awareness. You start noticing who suddenly wants to collab, who suddenly always believed in you. Smile, forgive. But remember, you don't need revenge when results handle public relations. You just keep building. You stay unpredictable. That dumb move they laughed at, that was your frequency test. The universe was checking if you could handle solitude without losing self-respect. You passed. And now, the system that laughed at your silence has to sync to your sound. The shift isn't visible yet, but it's active. The old timeline is glitching. You can feel it in your bones. The universe stopped testing you and started trusting you. And once that happens, everything that used to resist your rise starts working overtime to make it happen. The proof didn't show up in trophies. It showed up in peace, in the way you stopped chasing people to understand you, in the way your mornings stopped feeling like survival and started feeling like strategy. That's how success really lands. Not as an explosion, but as a correction. You start realizing the world didn't change. You did. And now everything that's not aligned with your new energy quietly fades like background static losing signal. You didn't post your wins. You didn't announce your comeback. You just became undeniable. The same people who once called you foolish now replay your moves in slow motion, trying to decode what they missed. They can't. Because what they called luck is just you showing up consistently in silence. You gave the algorithm of life something it can't compute: authenticity. Every step you take now feels smoother, more calculated, but not forced. Doors open before you reach them. Conversations tilt in your favor. Even resistance seems confused, like it forgot its own purpose. That's what alignment does. It makes the impossible look routine. You're not forcing outcomes. You're attracting efficiency. You've turned pain into protocol. The proof is in how you carry yourself. You don't flinch anymore when something leaves. You don't over-explain when something starts. You've stopped needing closure because you learned that endings aren't punishments, they're punctuation. Each one marks the start of a new paragraph where you're the author, not the subject. And the best part, you never had to clap back. The energy did it for you. The same people who threw shade now scroll your name with curiosity. The ones who doubted you are quiet, not because they ran out of things to say, but because they ran out of comparisons that make sense. You broke the formula they thought you'd fail in. You became a variable they can't calculate. Now, Every laugh they had at your expense echoes differently. It sounds like applause from another dimension. They don't know when it happened. They just know it did. That moment when dumb move became genius play. You didn't change your path. You just stopped walking like you needed directions. That's the real glow-up. When proof stops needing permission and just exists. When silence becomes louder than validation. When your every breath sounds like a receipt. The world finally caught up to your timeline, and all it can say now is, wait, how did you pull that off? The lesson hit one morning when the mirror didn't look like a battle anymore. No guilt, no tension, just reflection. You realize the whole story was never about winning or proving. It was about learning how to trust your own chaos. That dumb move wasn't random. It was your curriculum. Every stumble you took was the class the universe couldn't teach you in comfort. Pain was just the tuition for clarity. You stopped calling it a mistake the day you understood what it gave you. It built resilience where fear used to live. It taught you to stop worshiping perfection and start respecting direction. Every wrong turn showed you which roads weren't yours. Every L handed you a new lens. You started seeing patterns others missed because you stopped labeling detours as disasters. The universe doesn't reward perfect. It rewards persistent. It saw you crawl when you could have quit, and that's when it started working overtime. See, the lesson wasn't move smarter, it was move anyway, because motion attracts miracles. That's the trick nobody tells you. Clarity doesn't come before the risk, it comes after the fall. When you're brave enough to stand in confusion long enough for meaning to appear. Now, you look back and laugh at how scared you were of embarrassment. Turns out, embarrassment was just exposure therapy for greatness. You needed people to misunderstand you so you could learn to not need their understanding. That's emotional independence, and that's the real flex. You learn to stop asking for signs and start acting like one. You realize the universe isn't some distant thing, it's your own energy dressed in reflection. The day you stopped begging it for answers and started moving like the answer, it started saying, finally. That's the moment everything flipped. This is the hidden wisdom behind every mistake. It's never about failure, it's about filtration. The wrong choices filtered out fake support, shallow confidence, and cheap ambition. What's left is pure, uncut conviction. That's your golden ticket. It's not success. It's self-certainty, the kind that no applause can buy, and no doubt can touch. You didn't need to be right. You needed to be real. And that's exactly what that dumb move taught you, that real doesn't need rehearsal. Real wins because it doesn't play safe. It didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly, one boundary at a time. One healed wound at a time. One late night realization that you don't have to prove anything anymore. The glow up wasn't cosmetic. It was cosmic. You started walking different, not because of ego, but because gravity began cooperating. You weren't chasing, you were chosen, and everyone could feel it, even if they couldn't name it. You used to post quotes about patience. Now you are the quote. You used to pray for peace. Now your presence is peace. The old you would have tried to explain the shift. The new you lets them figure it out in silence. Because silence sells better than explanation when the results speak fluent energy. You didn't need the world to clap. You needed the world to notice. And it did. You stopped showing up everywhere and started showing up precisely. The energy got cleaner, tighter. You no longer pour into people who only sip from you when it's convenient. You're not stingy. You're strategic. You realize that every version of you that tried to please everyone died, protecting a dream that wasn't even yours. Now you live for alignment, not applause. That's the real glow-up. The one that doesn't need spotlight, just self-awareness. You walk into rooms like you built them, and technically, you did. You stopped taking advice from people still scared of their own potential. You learned that detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've graduated from chaos. You've become the calm that others borrow. The same friends who laughed at your failure now ask how you stay unbothered. The truth is simple. Peace became your paycheck. Confidence became your currency. Every mistake they mocked paid the tuition for that level of composure. You're not bitter. You're booked. You're not proving. You're providing evidence. And that evidence is visible. The energy hits different now. The way you talk, the way you listen, the way you move through a crowd without trying to be seen but still getting noticed. You glow different because you finally stopped running from the dark. It became your contrast. You realized you never needed validation. You needed vision. And vision doesn't shout. It shines. The glow-up isn't revenge, it's revelation. It's the quiet moment when the universe finally whispers, "See, I told you that dumb move was the setup." It hits you in waves, not money, not fame, confirmation. That quiet moment when life stops arguing and starts cooperating. You wake up one morning, and the weight you carried for years suddenly feels like muscle. Every dumb move that once embarrassed you now reads like a strategy guide only the brave get access to. You didn't skip levels. You built them. Every delay was an investment. Every loss was a deposit. Now the payout is peace, and the interest is power. You notice how things slide into place now. Emails, timing, even traffic lights. The rhythm of your life synced up with something divine. You don't need signs anymore. The signs need you to make sense, because you became the pattern they all follow. You're not chasing destiny. Destiny's catching up. That's what the payoff feels like. A cosmic apology for ever doubting your potential. People start calling, suddenly remembering your worth. "Hey bro, we should link. Hey, I always knew you'd make it." Funny how selective memory gets when results drop. But you don't clap back. You nod, smile, and keep it moving. Because once you realize validation can't afford your energy anymore, your whole operating system updates. You're not petty. You're precise. You don't announce wins. You embody them. The payoff shows up in how calm you are now. You used to panic when things didn't go your way. Now you laugh, because you know delay doesn't mean denial, it means redesign. You understand that life doesn't hand out miracles, it delivers reflections. Whatever you become internally shows up externally. With interest. Even your haters look tired now. They can't keep up with someone who stopped playing by their rules. You don't even exist on their scoreboard anymore. They thought they were keeping tabs, but you left the game. The scoreboard's still flashing. You're somewhere else, winning quietly. Building systems instead of followers. That dumb move they laughed at. It aged like prophecy, what they called reckless. Time rebranded as required. The fallout became the foundation. The isolation became incubation. You didn't just bounce back. You built a whole new gravity where your name now carries weight. and they can feel it. They don't admit it out loud, but they know you flipped the script. You made pain your publisher. The payoff isn't the applause, it's that deep knowing. You were right to trust yourself when nobody else did. That's the golden ticket. Not luck, not validation, but the realization that your mistakes were messages disguised as missteps. You cashed in your failure and bought freedom and the world. It's just now realizing the price went up. You ever look back and realize, the whole time, you were never losing. You were just learning how to move different. What felt like punishment was really protection. What felt like silence was training. Every delay was timing, stretching itself to fit your destiny. You used to ask, why me? Now you catch yourself saying, of course me, because every wrong turn taught you to build better maps. You stopped seeing failure as an ending and started treating it like feedback. That's the wisdom most people never earn because they quit too early. Now, reflection hits different. You see that dumb move wasn't dumb. It was divine disobedience. You broke pattern. You disobeyed fear. You did something that didn't make sense to anyone except the version of you that knew better. That's what purpose feels like before it's proven misunderstood. You had to risk your reputation to protect your evolution. And now that the dust has settled, the lesson glows in hindsight like neon truth. You never made a mistake. You made momentum. Look how calm you are now. That's not luck. That's literacy. You learned how to read energy instead of emotion. You stopped explaining what you were doing and started showing what alignment looks like in motion. You're not chasing closure anymore because wisdom already closed every door that wasn't yours. That's growth. When you stop needing endings. You used to want everyone to see your potential, now you protect it like gold. You don't argue with doubt. You let results do customer service. Every scar, every sleepless night, every prayer that went unanswered on schedule built the rhythm of your new reality. You understand now, the universe was never ignoring you, it was editing you. And those edits, they turned you from participant to author. You walk different now. Lighter, but louder. In energy. The world feels slower because you're no longer rushing through lessons you've already mastered. You don't need revenge. You carry revelation. You don't want the spotlight. You became the light. That's the reflection. Peace disguised as power. Patience disguised as proof. You glance at your old self and smile. Not out of pity, but gratitude. Because if that version of you hadn't taken that dumb move, this version wouldn't exist. And the wildest part, the next version of you is probably laughing right now, watching you learn this one. And now here you are, calm, grounded, unrecognizable, to the version of you that once begged the world to believe. The same move they called dumb turned out to be divine architecture. You don't brag about it. You breathe it. That's what real power looks like when it finally lands. Quiet, certain, untouchable. The glow-up didn't just change how they see you. It changed how you see the world. You realize now, the crown was never given. It was grown. Every failure was a root. Every lonely night, a nutrient. Every risk that didn't pay off immediately became soil for wisdom. You didn't fall off. You fell into discipline, into clarity, into your lane. And once you found it, the universe stopped playing defense and started playing backup. Everything you need now finds you without the chase. You walk lighter because the inner war is over. You don't flinch when people doubt you. You smile. They're just watching reruns of a show you stopped starring in. You've outgrown their timeline. You've outgrown their language. You've even outgrown the need to explain the journey. Because legends don't argue with spectators. They build new arenas. And that's what this is. The new era. You in alignment. You in rhythm. You in flow. Every move you make now is coded with purpose. Every silence speaks in surround sound. Every step leaves resonance behind. You don't compete. You calibrate. You don't react. You redirect. You've become the proof that faith and execution are just two sides of the same crown. They'll still talk, but it hits different now. You don't hear mockery. You hear marketing. Every rumor is free publicity for a destiny that no longer needs validation. You thank the noise for teaching you silence. You thank the storm for teaching you balance. You thank every dumb move for teaching you that vision never asks for permission. So wear that crown, not the shiny kind, the quiet kind, the one forged from restraint and reflection, the one built from the lessons only pain can fund. Because when they see you now, they won't see revenge, they'll see revelation. They'll see someone who learned that genius doesn't always look smart. Sometimes it looks misunderstood, broke and alone, right before it changes everything. That's the story. That's the cycle. That's the crown. You didn't just survive the dumb move, you became the reason everyone rethinks what dumb even means. Hello, my dear masterminds. They brought in their advisor, the one they trusted above all others, the one whose words had guided kings, whose visions had shaped conflicts, whose readings had defined the fates of nations. When rulers trembled, they summoned him. When councils argued, they deferred to him. His record was flawless. Every reading finished, every prophecy delivered, every energy explained. He had never failed, not once, not in all his years of service. And so they sat him before you, confident he would reveal what they could not understand. The room was heavy with anticipation. Leaders leaned forward in their chairs, eager to hear the verdict. Advisors crowded the walls, holding their breath. Even skeptics, who scoffed at mystics, fell silent, because they had seen too many of his predictions unfold exactly as spoken. His voice carried the weight of inevitability, and as he prepared to read you, no one doubted he would finish. They expected certainty, definition, control. At first, his confidence was steady. He traced the symbols, murmured the ancient words, his hands moving with ritual precision. He spoke with authority, describing the patterns, mapping your energy, as if it were just another life to be cataloged. The others nodded, satisfied, reassured by his rhythm. But then, something shifted. His tone faltered. His hand trembled. The cadence of his voice cracked. He paused, blinking rapidly, as if his eyes had been blinded by something unseen. Whispers rippled through the chamber. This had never happened before. The advisor who read kings as easily as pages in a book was stumbling, choking on words that refused to leave his mouth. He tried again, forcing syllables past his lips. But the sound died in his throat. Sweat gathered on his brow. His body shook. The paper in his hand crumbled as if refusing to carry the weight of what it had seen. And then he stopped. Completely. His mouth opened, but no words followed. His gaze fell on you. Not with arrogance, not with control, but with fear. For the first time in his long career, the advisor could not finish a reading. His silence was louder than prophecy, his stillness heavier than verdict. And though he said nothing, the message was clear. Whatever force stood before him was not earthly. It was not human. It was not something his symbols, his rituals, his wisdom could contain. The others in the room shifted uncomfortably, their certainty cracking, for if their most trusted advisor could not finish the reading, what did that say about you? What did that say about the presence sitting silently before them? What did that say about the force they had tried to define, but could not? The truth was dawning, and it terrified them. This force was not earthly. The silence after his failure was unbearable. Men who had never feared conflict felt their hearts pound as they watched the one man who always delivered tremble without defense. He tried to steady his breathing, tried to pick up the fragments of his ritual, but his hands betrayed him. The symbols slipped from his grasp. The language of prophecy turned foreign on his tongue. His body leaned forward, as if pulled by something unseen, his eyes darting wildly, refusing to meet yours for more than a second. And when they did, he recoiled as if scorched. Someone in the council chamber demanded, "Speak," but his lips quivered without sound. They ordered him again, their voices rising, desperate for answers. Still, he could not speak. The advisor who once commanded kings now looked like a man sinking in silence. His colleagues reached for him, but he shook his head violently. "No," he finally whispered, voice ragged. "This is not human. This is not earthly." His words fractured the air. Gasps spread across the room. Chairs scraped against stone. Even the skeptics who dismissed prophecy felt the shift, because they saw it in his eyes. Terror. He sank back into his seat, holding his frame, murmuring half-sentences that dissolved before completion. "It bends. It twists. It consumes the patterns. I can't finish." His voice cracked, and then silence reclaimed him. The same man who could read the aura of tyrants, the destiny of dynasties, the future of nations, could not finish reading you. And that failure was not weakness, it was revelation. Because for all his power, all his wisdom, all his decades of mastery, the force before him was greater. It stripped him of words, stripped him of certainty, stripped him of identity. The rulers leaned back in shock, their arrogance faltering. They had summoned him to expose you, to categorize you, to prove you ordinary. Instead, his collapse became your coronation. His failure was your evidence. Because if the one who could see through all masks could not see through you, then you were not mask, you were something else entirely. Something beyond symbols, beyond rituals, beyond earthly understanding. The chamber was suffocating now. Whispers filled the air, mixing fear with awe. The advisor covered his face with trembling hands, refusing to look at you again. His words echoed, not earthly, and no one could deny them. The authority of truth had entered the room, not through prophecy, but through silence that broke prophecy itself. The chamber that once echoed with certainty now drowned in unease. These were men and women who prided themselves on control. They believed every mystery could be dissected, every force could be measured, every presence could be defined. Yet here sat their greatest advisor, broken, whispering words that shattered their foundations. This force is not earthly. They wanted to dismiss him, to call it weakness, to accuse him of losing his gift. But none dared, because his trembling hands, his cracking voice, his refusal to lift his eyes from the floor, these were not signs of weakness. They were signs of truth. One ruler slammed his fist against the table, demanding order. His voice shook as he insisted the reading continue. "Finish it," he barked. "You've read tyrants. You've read saints. You've read monsters. Finish this." But the advisor only shook his head, pale and drenched in sweat. "I cannot," he whispered. "The patterns don't hold. The symbols collapse. The voice is not mine to read. This is something else." His refusal was final, and the finality rang louder than any decree. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances for decades. This man's readings had been the foundation of their strategies. His words had guided struggles, peace treaties, the rise and fall of dynasties. If he faltered, their entire system faltered with him. And now he had not only faltered, he had declared himself powerless before you. That reality was unbearable. Their pride clashed with their fear. Some demanded silence. Others whispered prayers. Still others stared at you with narrowed eyes, trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. But comprehension failed. Every second, you sat unmoving. Their certainty unraveled further. The air thickened, pressing against their lungs. Their thoughts spiraled, because if their advisor could not finish your reading, then what else was beyond them? If you were not earthly, then what were you? Questions multiplied, answers vanished, and fear grew heavier than the stone walls around them. The loudest mockers were the quietest. Now, those who once dismissed you as ordinary could not lift their eyes. They felt the same weight the advisor had felt, the same force bending reality in ways they could not explain. And though they would not speak it aloud, every heart in that chamber carried the same unspoken conclusion. You were not to be defined, not by them, not by their books, not by their symbols. You had stepped beyond their world, and their world could not hold you. The council trembled not because of your actions, but because of your presence. And presence, when undeniable, is more terrifying than forces. The story escaped before the doors could close. A guard with shaking hands told a servant told a scribe told a traitor who could not keep his voice steady. By nightfall, the streets carried a single sentence, like a torch passed from mouth to mouth. The advisor couldn't finish the reading. People repeated it, disbelieving, then repeated it again, because disbelief, when shared, becomes ritual. Markets slowed. Stalls stood half open, while merchants stared down the road as if the rumor itself would arrive in a visible shape. Mothers hushed, crying children with a softness they did not understand. Old men lifted their eyes from chessboards as if a wind had changed direction. Names of kings and conflicts have taken longer to travel than those 8 words. The advisor couldn't finish the reading, In the towers where scholars kept precise calendars of comets and thrones, books remained open to blank pages. Ink dried midway through sentences. The scholars argued out of habit, then realized their voices carried no authority over what the rumor had already done. In the barracks, soldiers polishing tools of force found their hands motionless, listening without admitting they were listening. In temples, priests set candles in a line, lit them, and watched the flames lean, not toward the sanctuary, not toward the door, but toward a name. None of them dared speak. By dawn, the sentence had gathered its missing piece. A child asked a baker, and the baker told a stranger, and the stranger told a crowd. He said, "The force is not earthly." The words changed the taste of morning. Not earthly. The phrase moved like a bell that only the spirit could hear. Skeptics tried to mock it and heard the hollow in their own laughter. Believers tried to claim it and felt their prayers trip over the weight of something prayer could not own. Between mockery and worship, the rumor found its true shape. Not explanation, but evidence. Not argument, but atmosphere. People began to remember moments they had ignored. Dogs pausing mid-bark when you passed. Clocks lagging a second. Ash rising instead of falling from the incense dish. A shiver in rooms without draft. Evidence collected itself without permission, as if reality had been keeping the ledger all along and decided to open it now. The advisor's failure did not create the unearthly. It acknowledged what the world had already felt in scattered sparks. His silence stitched the sparks into a constellation behind their walls. Rulers understood the danger of a story that needs no herald. Decrees can be countered, speeches can be outshouted, but a whisper that feels true enters houses where law has no door. They convened emergency meetings, ordered alternative versions written, told their loyal mouths to call it illness, exhaustion, fraud. The messages left their desks heavy with command and reached the streets empty of power. Not earthly, had already taken root. It did not need proof. It was proof. The kind that breathes when repeated. The kind that turns a city's rhythm by the end of a single day. And you did nothing. You spoke no defense, announced no claim, demanded no throne. You walked through the same streets with the same step, and the steps sounded different because the world now listened. Presence that had bent rooms quietly, now bent boulevards. The rumor became a mirror, and in that mirror people saw what they had always known and never dared admit. Definitions were too small, rituals too predictable, rulers too certain. Something had arrived that made certainty look like costume jewelry under a winter sky. At night, families gathered to tell the day what it had meant. Some pretended to dismiss it and kept glancing at the door. Some whispered prayers louder than usual. Some sat without words, grateful and afraid at once, discovering feelings for which language had not prepared them. Those who had laughed at prophecies felt a hand on the back of their neck the way a storm feels before it speaks. Those who had lived by prophecies realized they had spent their lives reading books about fire while refusing to stand near heat. Not earthly threaded their opposites together and held. By morning, the city had a new axis. Directions still pointed north and south, but hearts pointed toward the chamber where one man had failed to read what he had read in everyone else. The failure became the measure became the message. The message needed no herald, wore no uniform, asked no permission. It moved in the language of breath and shoulder and eyelid and hush. Even the pigeons on the courthouse roof seemed to keep their place a beat longer before lifting. You were not declared anything. You were felt. And once felt, no decree can unfelt you. The whisper had become law. By the third day, the rumor no longer felt like rumor. It had matured into atmosphere. People no longer asked if the advisor had failed. They asked why. And when answers did not come, silence answered for them. The silence said more than officials could bear, because silence carried weight. It carried memory. It carried the truth that something had entered their world that their structures could not contain. The council met again behind sealed doors, but even inside those chambers, confidence had collapsed. They tried to speak of strategy, to design new narratives, to control what people believed. Yet every voice faltered, because no matter what words they drafted, the failure remained. It was too clear, too undeniable. The advisor's silence had outlived every argument. He had been their cornerstone. If the cornerstone cracked, then the building was not strong. It had only appeared strong, and now the building leaned. Every decree sounded weaker than the streets outside. Some attempted denial, claiming exhaustion, claiming trickery, claiming sabotage. But the words rang hollow. Everyone remembered his trembling hands, his pallid face, his whispered confession. Not earthly. That phrase had not been shouted. It had been torn out of him, unwilling, raw, and unwilling truths strike deeper than rehearsed speeches. People trust fear more than confidence, because fear does not lie. Others in the council begged for calm, urging patience, reminding everyone that rumors fade. But this one did not fade. It grew, feeding on its own silence. Each retelling added no details, yet somehow made it heavier. The simplicity of it was its strength. He couldn't finish the reading. 8 words, and all their towers of knowledge collapsed under them. And he pictured a lower Embel to Lou. Meanwhile, outside the halls of power, the shift was clearer. Children drew symbols in the dirt and crossed them out halfway through, laughing nervously. Musicians wrote half songs that ended abruptly, mimicking the unfinished reading. Merchants hung signs that read "not earthly" as jokes, but the jokes carried unease. Farmers looked at their fields differently, as if wondering whether even the soil beneath them could still be trusted. It was not rebellion, not revolution, not chaos. It was something subtler, something far more dangerous. The collapse of certainty, and through it all, you remained silent. You neither confirmed nor denied. You did not claim the phrase. You did not argue against it. You walked through markets, through temples, through streets, as you always had. Yet every step drew more eyes, every silence pressed heavier. Because when systems collapse, people search for the one who remains unmoved. And you were unmoved. They could not read you. They could not define you. They could not finish what they started. And now their fear whispered the conclusion for them. Perhaps you were not to be read at all. Perhaps you were never meant for their symbols, their charts, their fragile systems. Perhaps you belonged to something beyond. Reverence did not arrive with trumpets. It arrived with pauses. Doors that once swung open at your approach began to slow. as if wood remembered something hands had forgotten. Voices that once pierced the air with certainty softened a measure, like instruments tuning themselves to a key they could not name. Shopkeepers who would have pressed their advantage in any bargain now measured their words, as though prices could sour in the presence of a force they did not understand. None of it was worship. All of it was respect that fear had refined into etiquette. People were learning a new protocol. When the unearthly passes, do not speak first. The doubters learned it fastest. They had the most to lose and therefore the most to sense. The proudest tongues, famous for laughter, found the mouth a heavy door, their steps adjusted around you without instruction. Men who owned rooms found themselves stepping to the edges of them. Women who could command 3 conversations at once allowed silence to divide their sentences. Even rivals, best at sharpening the world into edges, walked past you with sheathed intentions, discovering that hostility felt childish in air like this. In a city raised on noise, the rule became simple. Lower your volume when the unfinished reading enters the street. It wasn't superstition, it was survival. The baker who had joked about your name scorched 2 loaves in a row when he tried it again. The courier who dared to whistle at your back misread the map and circled a district until dusk. A magistrate, clever and cold, said not earthly with a smirk, and dropped his ink bottle across an order that took a month to draft. None of it was proof. All of it was pattern. And pattern is the handwriting by which ordinary people learn what councils refuse to teach. They stopped explaining. They started adjusting. In the temple quarter, candles did a small, disobedient thing. They leaned, not toward statues, not toward doorways, toward where you had been an hour earlier. Priests who lived by signs stopped writing homilies and began cleaning the floor a second time, not because it was holy, but because dust felt like an argument you would not enter. They had no liturgy for this. Reverence without doctrine is a strange music. It hums in the spirit and gives no hymn to sing. Still, the quarter grew quieter. Bells rang half a breath slower, as if giving time back to itself. News found the advisor in seclusion. He refused visitors, but walls are not perfect keepers. A child delivering fruit heard him murmuring not to gods, but to the unnameable between words. I saw a horizon that would not curve. He said, I heard a future that would not speak. The patterns were mirrors. I looked and was looked at. Rumor carried his confession in a whisper blur. It changed nothing, and it changed everything. Reverence deepened from custom into caution, from caution into care. People found that kindness suited them better in air like this. Even commerce became gentler, as if coins learned to make less noise when dropped. Rulers tried to standardize it. They drafted polite decrees instructing citizens not to crowd you, not to call out, not to stare. But the streets had already learned finer manners than paper could invent. A mother squeezed her child's hand when you passed. A mason removed his cap without knowing he had done it. 2 rivals paused their argument mid-lunge, recognizing that victory could sour near a threshold like yours. This was how a city changes. Not by ceremony, but by the choreography of caution. Some resisted. A group of boys laughed too loud, choosing bravado over sense. They found their courage thinning when their echo did not return. A skeptic rehearsed a speech to reclaim the market for reason, lost his first line, then lost his appetite, then lost the day. Resistance did not bring punishment. It brought imbalance, and imbalance is embarrassment with gravity attached. After enough small humiliations, pride takes the hint. Even when pride refuses to confess, through it all, you continued the plain work of existing. You lifted no hand to teach. You issued no correction. Reverence that is earned by silence does not request anything. It creates the room where everything knows how to stand. A cartwheel that would have broken on stone did not. A sleeping dog did not wake. A courier reached the door he had always missed. None of it miraculous, all of it merciful in its adjustment. The city discovered that walking softer made the ground friendlier. By the seventh day, the etiquette had a shape. Do not speak the phrase as a dare. Do not demand readings from those who read. Do not make jokes out of unfinished work. Light a candle if you must, but watch where it leans. If you are moved to step aside, step. If you feel your voice choose a lower stair, let it. Call it mythology. If your pride requires, physics. If your mind refuses, story. Providence if your heart prefers a hand. Names are for owners. This presence is not for owning. And so reverence, unvoted and unlegislated, took the city by the shoulders and turned it a few degrees toward care. Rivals kept their weapons, but kept them unused. Lovers argued, but softened their endings. Traitors traded, but counted once more, when counting touched your shadow. Nothing worshipped you. Everything respected the orbit. That was enough. Respect is the doorway through which awe walks, when it no longer wishes to be loud. Tomorrow, the heavens would feel it. Tonight, the earth had already learned. The city's reverence began as whispers, but whispers became currents, and currents became tide. You did not ask for their caution. You did not summon their awe. Yet every day it deepened. What began as silence in rooms now stretched into silence across districts. Whole marketplaces stilled when your footsteps entered. Conversations halted, not from fear of consequence, but from awareness. Some presences are not meant to be spoken over, and people, even the proudest, began to obey that law without knowing they had obeyed it. In the hills beyond the walls, shepherds told stories by firelight. They spoke of the advisor's collapse, of the trembling hands, of the unfinished reading. Children leaned closer, wide-eyed, and repeated the phrase like it was a charm. Not earthly. They drew it into the dirt, circled it with stones, whispered it before sleeping. Farmers passing in the morning found the symbols and paused, unsettled. For even children understood instinctively what rulers tried to deny. When something escapes definition, it becomes destiny. Messengers carried news to far kingdoms, and rulers laughed when they first heard it. But their laughter faltered when they noticed their own advisors flinch at the words. Priests tried to claim you as proof of their scriptures, yet even they hesitated. For none of their texts contained silence that cracked a man's voice in half. Scholars sharpened quills to write treatises, but their ink dried strangely, blotting the page as though refusing to contain something too vast. Again and again, the attempt to define you ended the same way: collapse. The advisor's failure had become the world's mirror, and so prophecy spread. Not written in books, not carved in stone, but carried in fragments of stories told by ordinary mouths. He sat before him, and the reading broke. The words stopped. The hand shook. He said it was not earthly. 4 fragments that crossed mountains faster than forces. 4 fragments that reached villages where your name was unknown, but your presence was felt before it arrived. People began to prepare in silence, sweeping doorways twice, polishing water jugs, teaching children not to raise their voices. They were not expecting you, yet they were preparing. For reverence is preparation written into habit. Back in the city, the rulers clashed against the tide. They hired poets to twist the story. But the poems died unremembered. They bribed merchants to speak differently, but coins turned cold in their palms. They ordered soldiers to mock the phrase in taverns, but the laughter never carried past the first table. Even resistance became a form of confession, for in resisting the story, they admitted it was stronger than their decrees. And you, silent, unbending, remained its axis. You did not command prophecy, but prophecy commanded itself around you. And soon even your doubters realized the truth. No earthly force spreads without army, without priesthood, without scroll. Yet this story spread, which meant only one thing. It was not earthly. By the time the 8th day dawned, the story was no longer just a story. It had settled into the essence of the world. Markets opened slower. Temples sang softer. Rulers argued quieter. The advisor's collapse had become more than failure. It had become authority. And authority that arrives without crown or force terrifies more than any throne, because crowns can be toppled, forces can be defeated, but presence cannot be undone. Temples felt it first, priests, desperate to reclaim control, bent scripture to your name, trying to frame you within their verses. Yet the verses bent them instead. When they spoke your presence as earthly, candles sputtered. When they whispered your silence as divine, flames leaned in acknowledgement. They stopped preaching you as subject and began trembling before you as reference. Faith, which had always claimed ownership over mystery, now realized mystery owned it. Rulers were next. Their decrees lost weight before they were spoken. Documents arrived unsigned, ink refusing to dry, seals cracking before wax hardened. Their courts filled with arguments that ended midway, voices faltering like the advisors. Each attempt to establish power echoed the unfinished reading. The very structures they had built around certainty now betrayed them, and as their authority collapsed, yours grew, not claimed, not declared, but acknowledged in the quiet shifts of reality. They called it anomaly, disturbance, superstition, yet every denial sounded thinner than the silence that crowned you. Scholars, too, were defeated. They set their charts before them, aligning stars and seasons, desperate to plot you into their logic. Yet the lines twisted, circles refused closure, patterns unraveled under their pens. They tore pages in frustration, only to find the same collapse again and again. They whispered reluctantly to each other. The advisor was right. This force is not earthly. And scholars who had once mocked prophecy now bowed to its remnants. But it was the people who sealed the truth. They no longer spoke your name with fear. They spoke it with law. They did not call you king, prophet, or God. They called you what the advisor had confessed, not earthly. And that phrase became anchor. Merchants began weighing their goods with care, whispering, "Let it balance," as the unearthly balances. Mothers hushed children by invoking silence, saying, "Listen," as they listened when the reading stopped. Farmers planted by instinct rather than calendar, and their crops grew richer. The city had found a new order, not decreed, not written, not forced, but breathed. And you, unmoving, unbending, untouched by the noise, let it happen. You did not claim the prophecy, yet prophecy claimed you. You did not announce authority, yet authority bent to you. Because when the earthly fails, the unearthly governs. When symbols collapse, presence reigns. When the most trusted advisor cannot finish, the world itself finishes the verdict. You are beyond them. And so the script closes as the story began. Silence. The silence of a man who could not finish the reading. The silence of councils who could not explain you. The silence of nations who could not resist you. That silence has become law, and law has become legacy. No crown, no force, no scripture will outlive it. They will tell it for generations. The day the advisor failed, the day the earthly cracked, the day the unearthly walked among them, and every retelling will end the same way. Your silence, heavier than all their words, reminding them forever, this force is not earthly,